That is the end of The Student, written by H.M. Lynn and read by Gemma Lawrence. Recorded by Isis Audio 2025. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. This has been a presentation for Boldwood. Chapter 1. I've been sitting in the small room by the university library for 10 minutes, and already Duncan sent me 4 texts. Good luck. Don't get stressed and flustered. You can do this. Not to put too much pressure on you, but we could really do with this money. But it doesn't matter if you don't get it. Love you. Considering I never normally get more than 2 texts a day full stop, it's clear he's as nervous about this interview as I am, and his nerves aren't helping me. I turn my phone over on the table and draw in a long breath. I shouldn't blame him. It is a big deal. Interview anxiety kept me up all of last night and made it impossible for me to think about anything else all day. This interview, this meeting, isn't just about the money. It could be the start of everything for me. Everything I've ever wanted. Not to mention, it would be confirmation that I was right to take a risk and start a degree when so much of me believed the opportunity was past. In most adult circumstances, 5 years isn't much of an age gap. Plenty of people find happy relationships with a far greater difference in age, and friendships, well, they can span decades, right? But when you start university and you're 5 years older than your peers, it shows. I didn't come here as a bright-eyed 18-year-old full of hope and optimism. I started as a 24-year-old with a past. A past I didn't want anybody to know about. My aim was simple. Stay off the radar and ensure the only time I was noticed was for my writing. The only time I wanted to draw attention to myself was when a lecturer saw the potential in me to make it in the literary world. And now, it's finally happened. Now I'm finally about to get my break. It was a short story I wrote about 2 siblings abandoned for several months in a remote coastal town that caught Professor Jarvis's attention. He saw potential, he told me, raw talent that could be harnessed. And he wanted to offer me an opportunity, this opportunity, to interview as a ghostwriter. Explain to me what ghostwriters do? Duncan had said when I came home, bouncing with excitement. I don't think he's ever seen me bounce before. I certainly hadn't been the bouncing type of person when he met me, but I could already feel the difference. This could change everything. You write the book, I told him, but someone else's name goes on it. That doesn't seem fair, he said, and I realised I needed to give more of an explanation than that. Sometimes the clients have the ideas already. They're not writers, so they give you the plot and the concept, and you need to get the words down on paper. Sometimes you have to guide them a little bit more, make sure it all makes sense, world building, characters, that type of thing. And what's this one you're interviewing for? He asked. I'm not exactly sure, I admitted. All I know about this person is that they go by the name of Dr. B. My professor said he'd interviewed several people already for the position, but the client hadn't been happy with any of them. Then Professor Jarvis read my story and thought I might be a good fit. Just thinking of the way the professor spoke to me after his lecture last week still causes my chest to burn with pride. I'd honestly forgotten I could feel that way. For someone who spent their adult life dealing with shame, the sensation was almost unrecognisable. Not for Duncan, though. He's always proud of me. You've got this, Duncan said. You're going to be amazing. I don't want to get my hopes up. Like the professor said, other people have interviewed for this position. Other writers who are far more experienced than me. Have a bit of faith in yourself. After everything you've been through, you deserve this break. That was the one thing he'd said that I couldn't disagree with. Still, I've been trying not to get ahead of myself, but it's hard. It's really hard. Especially now, when everything is so close, it's almost like I can touch it. My laptop is still closed in front of me as I drum my fingers against the table, trying to keep myself grounded. Yet my mind flickers to the possible paycheck this job could give me. Duncan and I have been living in a nightmare shared accommodation for the last year. One room with all our belongings, including his guitars and double bass, which leaves little room for anything else. If I get this job, it would mean we would have enough money to rent a place by ourselves. With the sudden realisation that I haven't yet signed the forms agreeing to the interview, I open up my laptop and find the documents I need to complete, which includes an NDA that prohibits me from talking about the client or sharing my writing, and the bank details where they should send the money, on the slim chance I get the job. Professor Jarvis also told me I have to have everything signed, or the interview wouldn't be able to go ahead. It's a sign of how nervous I am that I almost forgot that. Still, it's a 2-minute job before they're all sent off. Then, I'm back to waiting. There's a clock on the wall in front of me, and it says 8:45, the same as my watch, the same as the laptop screen. I've still got 15 more minutes to wait, and I know each of them will drag. With the need to pass the time, I open up another document. It's a list of facts about myself, my resume, I guess, though there's probably not enough on it to call it that. Still, I know I need to have something for when the client asks me what my experience is, and I'm about to read through it as a quick refresher when my phone pings. I assume it's going to be Duncan again, but instead, it's Heidi's name on the screen. I hope this evening goes well. As I stare at the screen, my heart kicks up another notch. I could swear I didn't tell her about the interview. It's not that I don't trust Heidi. I do. She's the only person on the course who knows about my past. But this is the type of thing that would make Heidi jealous. Professor Jarvis told me this isn't something he normally puts students forward for, and it was only because I'm notably older than even some of his PhD students that he felt confident I could manage the situation professionally. Heidi has enough of an issue with comparing herself to everyone else as it is. But if it's not for the interview, then what is she talking about? What is she wishing me luck for? I think back through our conversations from earlier today. Mainly, we were talking about work that was due in, though I also mentioned how Duncan has a gig tonight. A pretty big one. So that's probably what she's referring to. I ping back a smiley face. I'm not an emoji person. I probably like them even less than I like socialising, but I don't have the focus to say more. When I glance back at the clock, I'm surprised by how quickly the time has passed. It's now only 3 minutes until this interview starts. My nerves rocket to a place where my pulse is audible against my eardrums, and when I look at my laptop, an email has come through. There is no title, no text at all, just a link to a meeting room. With my heart hammering in my chest, and a feeling close to nausea sweeping through me, I take a deep breath and click open. Chapter 2. There's no waiting. The room is open, and apparently both of us are in it, only I struggle to understand what I'm looking at. For a moment, I think the screen is still blank and that they haven't turned the camera on, but there are shadows moving across my image. Organic and varied in a way that wouldn't happen if there was no camera on. After a second, I realise that there is a curtain between the person and me, like this is a police interview and the witness's identity is being concealed. Francesca, so pleased to meet you. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat, but it's hard to shift. The words aren't spoken by a person, or at least not directly. They're synthesized. Not quite monotone, but no inflections, no warmth. The hair on the back of my neck prickles, but I fight the sensation down as I force myself to smile and respond. Thank you ever so much for wanting to see me, I say. Before we start, I just want you to know that this is my first interview for a ghostwriting position. I know that you've spoken to several more experienced writers, but obviously, if you think we're a good fit, I will do the very best job that I am capable of. And while I may not have experience in this nature of writing, I have written for various online and paper outlets. I've had short stories published in several magazines as well. I'm happy to send those to you if you would like to read through them. Well, I have to say, I normally start these interviews by being able to get a word in edgeways. A red heat burns my cheeks. Talking through uncomfortable situations has become my default. Probably because I know that if I keep talking and filling the air with words, it will stop other people from saying things I don't want to hear. Sorry, I say. Like I said, I'm new to this. I can tell, yes, but I won't hold that against you. We all have to start somewhere. Besides, creativity knows no age limits. Don't you agree? Absolutely, I say, sensing that's the right answer. I don't mention what I actually think about creativity requiring control and discipline to make that happen. I need someone who will write a very unique piece of literature for me, who will take my ideas and turn them into a manuscript with depth and structure. There's a pause before that last word comes out, possibly a delay in the text-to-speech software I suspect they're using, although it felt like they were searching for the right words. I can't help but wonder why they don't want to use their own voice. Are they famous? Famous people sometimes have ghostwriters, and it would make sense that they don't want me to see their face too, but I would have expected Professor Jarvis to tell me if that was the case. Do you mean you wish for me to help with the narrative, or do you already know how you want that to be? Do you already have your plot planned out, or do you wish for help with that too? I say, recalling everything I researched on ghostwriting. If I know what Dr. B's expectations are, it should help me give the right responses to the rest of his questions. I hope. I have a brief plot that needs further development, but I must say, you ask a lot of questions. I wonder, do you feel like you're interviewing me as much as I'm interviewing you? Again, a flush warms my cheeks, although I'm starting to wonder if that's their aim, to make me feel uncomfortable. As far as first impressions go, they're not making a great one, yet I suppose if you can afford the type of money this ghostwriting project pays, then you don't care what menial people like me think about you. I realise that this is you interviewing me, I say, very much so, but from what I have gathered, this is often a very collaborative process. And you want to make sure I'm a person you can collaborate with. The robotic sounds come out with no trace of humour or anger, just as an unreadable string of syllables. I will certainly try to be, if this works out, but now it is time for me to ask my questions, to learn about you. I assume that is agreeable. Yes, absolutely. I didn't have a chance to send through a CV, but if you'd like, they won't be that type of question. I need to know what you are like as a person. That is what matters to me. Like you. I need to know that I am working with a person I can collaborate with and who will express my ideas freely. Francesca. Do you like to be called Francesca to start with? What about Frankie or Franny? Fran, even. I let out an involuntary shudder at the sound of the name Franny. That was what my dad used to call me. Franny or Fran. Never ever Frankie or Francesca, which is why I make sure that those are always the names people address me by now. Whether or not he was guilty of what the police said he did doesn't change the fact that Franny is reserved for him. Francesca or Frankie is fine, I say. I don't mind either. Then I shall go for Francesca. Well, Francesca, can you tell me what in your life you are most proud of? What I'm most proud of? You mean in terms of my literary accomplishments? No. You as a person, as a human being. What are you most proud of? Have you fundraised thousands for charity, climbed a mountain, performed cello on an international stage? Of course, if your literary accomplishments are the thing you are most proud of, then by all means, say those. The answer requires some contemplation. I had expected to be asked about my writing goals, writing accomplishments, favourite novels, authors that inspire me, that type of thing. I didn't think I'd be asked to talk about me as a person. The suggestions they have made, like climbing mountains and fundraising, make me feel unusually inadequate. This seems to be causing you some difficulty. Dr. B's voice cuts through my thoughts. How long does it take to think up some cliché answer, like getting into a top university or being invited to a lucrative job with so little experience? That's what you were going to say, isn't it? Something like that? There is no tone to the voice, But I don't need it to know they're trying to rile me, although I ignore it. They want an answer that nobody else has given before. Well, that's what I'll give them. What I'm most proud of is that I picked myself up again after a tragedy that would ruin most people. That I haven't let my past dictate my future. That I have a real life, worth living, when for years I thought that would be beyond me. I've barely finished when their next question comes through. What was this tragedy that you speak of? If you feel comfortable in telling me about it, of course. I don't. I never feel comfortable talking about it. Some people would say I compartmentalize well, but I'd say I've blocked it out. I've put up a wall so high and thick that I almost pretend it never happened, other than those handfuls of times a year when I visit my mother's grave. But as much as I don't want to tell anyone else, I know how much money is at stake right now. And it's not like I have to give Dr. B everything, just enough for them to think they're getting a deeper insight into my mind, because that's obviously what they're after. My parents died when I was 18, I start. I know I'm missing some of the most important elements of the story, but I'm not giving them that. I'm giving them just enough to think I'm disclosing it all. When they died, I was very much alone. No family, no close friends. I lost the most important people in the world to me, and, unsurprisingly, fell into a pit so consumed with grief that for years I didn't think it would be possible to climb out. But I did. I climbed out of it by myself. I feel a pang of guilt as I say these words. Gloria played the biggest part in pulling me out of that pit, and without her, I might still be there. But I can't let her into my head right now, not when I need this. The fact that I keep going, and that people I see on a day-to-day basis don't know this about me, that's the thing I'm most proud of. For a second, I think I should stop there, but then an image of Duncan rises in my mind. One where he tells me every day how much he loves me and how proud he is of me. His pride is mine, and I deserve to share that. I guess I'm proud of having a heart still capable of loving, too. Of knowing that I'm building an incredible future, and that I'm even thinking about the future when, for years, every breath felt like agony. I'm most proud of knowing my legacy will not be dictated by my past. That's what I'm most proud of. When I sit back in my seat, I'm surprised to find I'm almost out of breath. My heart is hammering against my ribs so hard, it's causing a rush of blood to throb behind my temples. And for a minute, they are the only sounds I can hear. My body, my breaths. Beyond them is absolute silence. Silence that stretches and stretches as it wraps a tension around my body. Dr. B has not said a word. I stare at the screen, waiting for them to speak. To say how sorry they are that I had to suffer such loss, or reinforce how proud I should be of myself. But still, there's nothing at all. And for a moment, I wonder if they're still there. But as I clear my throat and prepare to say something, the tinny robotic voice rattles through my speakers. Fine. Now tell me what you're most ashamed of. Chapter 3. Any doubts I had about this being an abnormal interview have been erased. When the hell did anybody ever ask you to talk about what you were most ashamed of? The surge of adrenaline from my last answer has left my breath quickened, though I respond to the question almost immediately. I suppose it would be the depression I fell into after my parents' death. Bullshit. The answer causes me to flinch in surprise. Sorry? I call bullshit on that. You just told me how you're most proud of picking yourself up again. Your shame can't come from the antithesis of that, because you know that you were well within your right to face depression. I'm sure with what you went through, it would be almost expected, and you would never think badly of another for suffering that, so I do not believe you would be ashamed of yourself. So like I say, bullshit. What are you actually most ashamed of? I can feel my jaw hanging open as I stare at the screen. I can assure you that's the case. Well, I assure you, I think that's bull. Give me something real. Show me how much you want this, Show me your dark side." My jaw is still slack, but I still manage to scoff. It's clear now that this entire interview has been a game. Probably the same game they've played with all the other interviewees, and I'm done with it. They've been trying to rile me, and they've succeeded. Right now, the thing I'm most ashamed of is actually believing that this was a genuine interview, that you were someone who was keen on creating a piece of literary work, rather than just tormenting people for your own entertainment. I'm ashamed that I actually lost hours of my life being nervous about some sick prank to fulfill your own twisted desires. That, I promise you, is the very depth of my shame. Thank you for your time, but I'm done here. I don't even bother switching off the screen. I just slam the laptop lid closed. And for a second, I stay there, my heart pounding. I feel physically sick. Whoever this Dr. B is, they are not somebody I want in my life. My shame. There is nobody in the world who knows the truth of my shame, because I won't even admit it to myself. I'm sure as hell not going to let a stranger know the thoughts that whir through my mind in the depths of my darkest hours. Not a freaking chance. With my eyes closed, I draw in several deep breaths. I won't let somebody like this get to me. I've been through far too much for that to be the case. But Dr. B has got under my skin. The questions, the voice, the anonymity. It's all a play designed to disturb whoever they're talking to, and I'm embarrassed at how well it worked on me. They could offer me twice the pay, and I would still run a mile. A flicker of guilt sparks within me. Duncan was so optimistic. He had so much faith in me, and now I'm going to have to tell him what I did. How I hung up in anger. I'm sure he'll see the truth, though, that I was never actually in with a chance of getting the job and earning this money. My pulse has just about returned to normal, but the unease of the situation has left me not wanting to be on my own. Unfortunately, Duncan is gigging and won't be home until close to midnight. I can't even stay in the library that much longer, what with it closing in just under an hour. Which means I have to find another way to deal with this anxiety. As I contemplate my options for the night, I can't help but be even more annoyed. It was a dodgy Zoom call, that was all. I should have forgotten it already. After all, I went back to my parents' house only 3 weeks after the incident. I would probably still be there if Gloria and Duncan hadn't persuaded me that I needed to move on with my life. As I think back to those days, a pang of sadness hits me. I really had assumed Gloria would be the one friend who would be in my life forever. So many left me after the incident, either because of what happened or because of how I refused to believe the police report and my dad's guilt. It was cut and dry in their minds. Murder-suicide. But they didn't know my father. They didn't understand he'd never do something like that. Part of me thought I'd never trust anyone again. But then Gloria turned up. She restored just a tiny sliver of the faith I had in humanity. And if it hadn't been for Duncan, she would have destroyed all of that again. With a short breath in, I tried to shake Gloria from my mind and fire off a message to Heidi. Thinking of going to watch Duncan at his gig. Fancy coming with me? I don't go out much. I can probably count the number of times I've actually socialised over the past year on one hand. But I need a drink. And I don't want to do it alone at home, with Phil playing his computer game so loudly in the living room that I have to wear earplugs just to hear myself think. The message goes through but remains unread. I shouldn't be surprised. Heidi books up her weekends months in advance. She calls it the burden of an influencer lifestyle, saying that it stops her from doing anything spontaneous. But we both know she's not going to quit anytime soon, or possibly ever. And why should she? If she does finally finish the novel she's been talking about writing for the last 5 years, she's got a ready, waiting audience. Of course, I could have an audience too if I told people about my past. If they knew who I was, I'm sure there'd be plenty of people wanting to read a book by a woman whose father supposedly killed her mother and left her alone to come out the other side of the tragedy. But I have no intention of using my past as leverage for my future. I move from the messages on my phone to the dial screen. There's a good chance that Heidi will happily invite me along to wherever she is, but as I scroll down my contact lists to her name, my eyes stop on the one above it, Gloria. It's been over a year since I stopped trying. Since I gave up trying to make her talk to me, to make her explain why she suddenly no longer wanted to be a part of my life. I went through the emotions of grief at her loss almost as keenly as I had done with my parents. But unlike with them, I eventually came to a conclusion. If she didn't want to be in my life, then I should just accept that and move on with mine. I truly thought I was over her, over the loss of the friendship. But as I stare at her name, my heart twists and tightens, and before I can stop myself, I hit dial. Chapter 4. You hear the saying, it's a slippery slope, all the time, don't you? With things like depression or addiction, alcohol or anxiety, with anything that's remotely negative, people are ready to spurt that saying. But for me, it wasn't. No, there was no smooth sliding descent for me. It was a plummet, one drop straight down. My parents' death rocked everything. People's refusal to believe that someone else might have been responsible. The therapist I saw said that my denial was due to my guilt. During my younger years, Mum and I were inseparable, probably because of how much time my father spent away for work. It's unsurprising that she was my original go-to person for so long. But then, around the age of 12 or 13, that changed. It wasn't that I no longer loved my mother. I did. I adored her. But there was something so special about my father. I'm sure our constant separation played a part in the rose-tinted glasses through which I viewed him. While he continued to spend weeks away on long-haul trips, the closeness that I had once adored with my mother frustrated me. Her mannerisms and foibles would niggle and grate on me, and mine on her. It was never anything major, just the normal gripes of a mother and a teenage daughter, compounded by how much time we spent together. She was the one who had to tell me to tidy my room, who had to get me up in the morning, and at night force me into bed when I still wanted to stay up. I wasn't a bad kid. Far from it. But she was still the only one who had to parent. He was the one who would sweep in, like the sun, and make me feel like I was some sparkling, golden, magical treasure that he couldn't live without. I sometimes wonder if she died thinking he was my favourite. If she took that bullet to the stomach, whoever fired it, believing that I loved my father more than her. I hope to God she didn't. Their deaths were only part of what I had to suffer. There was the police, the news crews, paying off my father's debt and discovering that my inheritance was little more than a few £1,000s. I had to endure being alone. Truly alone. And the thing is, with a slope, there's some chance of climbing out. You see it at the play park all the time. The rebelling children who stubbornly claw their way up metal slides, despite their parents' protests, or the hikers who use their poles to tackle the steepest terrain that normal folk like me would shun. But a sheer cliff face, like the one I was pushed off after my mother's murder, there's no way you can claw your way out of something that vertical. It's just not possible. You need another person, either to throw down the rope or to yank you out of the abyss. You can't do it on your own. But for nearly a year, I didn't have anyone. No one I trusted to hold the ladder steady enough that I could step onto that first rung. But then Gloria showed up. Moving was normal for me growing up. By the time I was 16, I'd lived in 9 different houses, and every time we got a new place, my dad would let me decorate my room in whatever style I wanted, regardless of what the landlord said. Rainbow-coloured walls, a mural of Aslan. I even went dark red during my very brief goth phase. It didn't matter. Whatever I wanted, he made sure I had it. He would smooth it over later. I know a lot of his behaviour was because of guilt, of course. It was his job making us move constantly, after all. He wasn't just an average long-haul driver. He helped set up new depots around the country, and that meant taking us with him. Looking back, my childhood lacked consistency. I got good at forming friendships fast, but there was never much depth to them. And while my birthday parties were often lavish affairs where every person in the class was invited, sometimes I'd only been at the school a few weeks and didn't even know everyone's name by that point. Secondary school was harder still. Cliques were tougher to get into and nastier when they broke. So I focused on my schoolwork, hid away in books, and concentrated on reaching my goal of being a great writer. That was what I wanted. To write stories like the ones that I stayed up at night for, reading under the covers until my eyesight blurred. Stories like the ones my mum and dad would pile up on their bedside cabinets to read. I wanted to write mystery stories, fantastical stories, maybe even romance. I didn't care. All I knew was that it was my mission in life to write. A mission that I abandoned the moment they died, and I might never have thought of again had Gloria not come into my life. My parents had been dead for 11 months, and the local papers had just about stopped hounding me, other than the occasional anniversary pieces that came out at almost monthly intervals. It probably helped that I gave them nothing, and there was no one else to go to in the hope of finding sordid tidbits about my parents. We'd only been in the Suffolk village for 2 years when they died, just long enough for me to do my A-levels, and I'd nowhere else to go. Literally. No aunts and uncles, no godparents. One good friend of my mother's from when we lived in Southampton offered to put me up, but I could tell it was a hollow offer. She had 3 of her own children, all under 13. There was no way she wanted to add an orphan of horrific circumstances to that situation. Not unless her plan was to use me as a live-in babysitter. Besides, the landlord was happy to keep me in the house at minimal rent. It wasn't like he could get anyone else in, although he did sort out the repaint at no cost to me. I don't know how I planned to live my life, or if I even intended to keep living it at all, but then one day, she came knocking on my door. "You live in this house by yourself, right? You've got an empty double bedroom. Any chance you want to sublet it?" Sublet my parents' bedroom? I actually laughed at this curly-haired woman who didn't look much older than me as she stood on my doorstep with so much confidence. "You don't want to live here," I said, "believe me." "Because your dad killed your mum downstairs, yeah, I know. I went into the estate agents, told them my budget, and they laughed. Then someone suggested I see if you were in the market for a housemate. They gave me the landlord's number, but I figured I should check the place out for myself, see if I get bad vibes or anything. So, can I check it out? I don't have much stuff. This is it." She pointed to the heavy rucksack on her back as I stepped to the side, still not sure what I was doing as I let her walk through the hallway and into the living room. "Nice television. Sofa looks comfy." She slung her bag off her back and dropped down onto the chair as I stared at the TV screen and the thick layer of dust that covered it. "I need to have this seat, or we can move the chairs. I just hate it when you get a reflection on the screen, don't you?" I'm not. It doesn't bother me. And he didn't kill her. The police just didn't bother looking into anyone else. They were lazy. Her eyes moved from the room to meet mine, and it felt for the first time like someone was actually listening to me. "That's shit. Really shit," she said, before shrugging. "Well, I'm a very average cook, but I can use a jar of sauce if you fancy alternating meals. Actually, cooking for you might be a good idea. Otherwise, I'll just live off cheese toasties." "I like cheese toasties," I said, still unsure whether the strong impression I was getting of this girl was positive or negative. "Me too, maybe too much. But we could have one cheese toasty night a week. Maybe with a movie, if you like films, but not rom-coms. I hate rom-coms." And just like that, I had a roommate. Chapter 5. Her name is at the top of the screen, with "Calling" written below it. I can feel the air quivering in my lungs as I hold it tightly, like I'm not sure what might happen if I allow myself to breathe. Even as I stare at the phone, I'm not expecting the call to go through. Maybe it'll give a long, strange dial tone, like she's abroad. Maybe it'll do nothing at all. Just go dead, as she hangs up on me the way she has done dozens of times before. Or maybe an electronic voice will tell me that this number is no longer in use. There are numerous options for what could happen, and I'm ready to hang up, but before I do, an unexpected noise takes me by surprise. It's ringing. A normal ringtone is chiming from the speakers. Each ring causes my pulse to hitch higher. I can't remember the last time I got this close to speaking to her, and the thought that she might pick up causes a new fear to flood me. What am I going to say? I'm pleased you're alive? Where the hell have you been? Why the fuck did you leave the way you did? My heart is rising higher and higher in my throat and making my breaths grow more and more shallow. Any second now, I'm going to be sent to voicemail. I'm certain of it. And I'm not humiliating myself by leaving another message that she won't bother listening to. That habit died months ago. Besides, I've suffered enough humiliation for one night. I hover my thumb above the end call button, only for the ringing to stop. Frankie? It takes me a second to realise that it's actually her. It's actually Gloria. Tears prick the backs of my eyes. Gloria, I didn't think you'd answer, I say. I know, I don't think I should have. Her voice sounds timid, strange, and yet unmistakably Gloria. I'm glad you did. It's good to hear your voice. A pause follows my words, one that extends so long I have to check my phone to make sure she hasn't hung up. When she speaks again, her words have a far harsher timbre. Why are you calling me? The lump that was rising in my throat is now blocking it entirely as I struggle to respond. I just wanted to hear how you were. I've missed you. Again, she doesn't respond immediately, but it's not entirely silent. There's a slight rattle. A sniffing, perhaps. Gloria, are you okay? You can talk to me. You know that, right? There is no mistaking it. The sound that comes through next is a sob. A definite sob. My heart surges. I knew she wouldn't leave me so cruelly if there hadn't been a reason for it. Something that made her believe she had to stay away from me. Gloria, I can help you. You know that, don't you? Duncan and I can help you. No! Her voice is sharp, almost as